papers instead. But if you can, please try to participate, because they need these studies for the school, for research purposes, for academic purposes. So reach out to the Department of Psychology, which is Jason, Brian, who was actually here too last class, Sundermeyer. So Jason Pike and Brian Sundermeyer. You can reach out to either one of them. So basically, it's open to start participating. We need 3 credit hours worth of that as a requirement for the course. The alternative is to write the papers, but at least, maybe try to participate at least one, and then maybe write the rest of the papers if you like. But yeah, try to get that in as soon as possible. Any questions about that? Okay. All right, we're gonna wrap up our discussion for memory. And and then our next chapter, which would be a really interesting one, is motivation. So hopefully that one should have a lot of personal kind of influence. Memory. So we talked about short-term, long-term last class, right? And I'll talk about, just kind of give an overview. Like, why do you guys think I make the tests the way that I make them, the exams? And let me ask, are other professors making similar tests that you're taking in their courses? First question, are other professors using my style in your courses? Like, what are they using? Just give me some examples. What are they using on their tests? They're using multiple choice.
Yeah.
Multiple choice?
Yeah.
How much of this multiple choice?
Majority of it.
Majority?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say multiple choice, right? Multiple choice would most likely be short term, right? Meaning a lot of this information is new to you guys, a lot of these areas of study, concepts within the book are probably new, right? Which means that if you study for an hour before an exam, you got a high likelihood you probably could recall it, right? You probably could recall the information we read from an hour ago, like, damn, I got it, right? But it's not this. The reason why I do my exams this way is to hopefully, and this is just hopeful, make it in your long-term memory. And you're not gonna recall everything in there. But long-term memory is something very simple, right? We wanna keep things very simple. Long-term memory is something personal. You're not gonna remember the 50 multiple choice questions to recall, like, oh, is that one correct? Is that one correct? That has no personal meaning to you. And if it's not personal, it doesn't have any value. So keeping things real simple. Things that are in your long-term memory. You know how to read. Very easy for you to read. You know how to walk. It's very easy for you to walk. It requires very little effort. You don't have to think about it too hard. What is that? Long-term memory is essentially things that you don't have to work hard for. You don't have to put a lot of effort. Why? Because you actually understand the meaning. Here, I don't believe, for the most part, that you'll retain the meaning. Right, so multiple choices, like, hey, I remember the definition. You know, I quickly remember it from an hour ago. I studied that. I didn't really look through the books, Professor Ross. I didn't really even look at the content up here, right? I went an hour ahead before class, tried to memorize it to the best of my abilities. And then I'm gonna say, can you recall that a year from now? Nah, you better, that's garbage. It went into your waste basket of your mind, right? Short-term things, if you don't work at it, it needs maintenance, it will go into your waste basket, just like a computer. which means things that are easily for you to remember. Can you remember your name? Can you recall in 1 second? Yes, you remember your name. Why? Requires no effort, because it has meaning. It's you, that's your name. You remember your birthday? Yes, I can. Why? It has meaning. It's personal.
You could also lose it.
What's that?
You could also lose that.
Lose your memory?
Like long term, you could also lose that.
Yes, there are things that are long term that can progress to short term. Yeah, and when it's in short term, you can lose it. Because short term memory has, it needs work, right? It means active maintenance to keep it there. If it doesn't have active maintenance, meaning that you don't use it, you lose it. But this is just to simply try for you guys to understand short term, long term. Because actually some of this deals with intelligence too, right? So we talk about how smart people are, how intelligent they are. Memory is a part of intelligence, right? And so it's just the people who are storing long-term things, people who actively read, right? If you read, there's a difference of how those words on the pages are stored into your brain. If you read, the paragraph begins to make meaning of words, and then the chapter will make meaning of the entire thing. But if you don't have meaning, they are just words, and words disappear. So multiple choice, hey, what's the correct one, circle the correct one out of these. It's just a word. It'll disappear, because it has absolutely no meaning to you. And meaning has to be personal. Hey, give me an example of your experience with X, Y, Z. Give me an example of your experience with this concept. How has this concept may have affected your life, right? Therefore, it's gonna have some personal things. And personal things are easy for people to remember, and it provides meaning. And meaning will typically, hopefully, try to go into long-term memory, so you're able to at least understand the concepts, right? So that's why I do it. And I made my test because as a student, that's something I noticed. I'm like, man, I only retain about 2% of this stuff. I got all these classes, all this work, all these papers, all these exams, and I'm only retaining like 3%, A lot of it's just quick multiple choice stuff, which you could read an hour before class, like, I'm gonna remember that. But here it's like, you draft up personal experiences. So that gives you kind of a template to understand, okay, why is meaning important? What part of memories are important? What part of memories are not important? How does it all work? We'll get into further how it all operates within our brain. I think we did the one where I showed you the digits. And we talked about how, phone numbers are 7 digits, right? And so typically we can understand 7 units at a time. That's why phone numbers are 7 digits long. But phone numbers, part of remembering phone numbers is the rhythm. The sound of 555, 1 2 1 2. There's a rhythm. 555 1 2 2. And that helps you also memorize too. So the visual aid is, I remember the actual numbers, to see the numbers in my head. The other part is the rhythm, or the sounds that we make as we start to speak certain things. So think of things what are some things auditory that has rhythm that we remember? It actually makes it easy to remember something. Yes?
Heartbeat.
Heartbeat? Yes. Yeah. So heartbeat. What about music? You're like, hey man, they wrote 3 verses of songs. Verse 1, verse 2, verse 3. Took me 3 times to remember the whole song. Right, that's a lot to remember. Right? And then it was easy to remember. It's probably a lot easier to remember than reading some of the stuff in the book for this class. It'll probably take a few times to really get it. But if you listen to a song, you're kind of like, wow, that rhythm, it sticks. And if it sticks, it goes long term. Which means, think of all the songs you recall now today. Things like Michael Jackson, right? Or Kanye West, or, you know, anything of the sort, you're like, yeah, I can sing the whole song right now. Like, that's pretty impressive. You can draw it out of your memory, and it didn't require any effort, very little effort. Right? Which are why songs need to be catchy. The most popular songs are catchy songs. Okay? The most popular songs are not the most technical songs. You're like that. That's, you know, the most technical song. You know, the lyrics are just off the charts. You know, that might not stick. Popular sticks because popular means it has meaning to people on a personal level. Our capacity for memory varies by age and distractions at time of memory loss, right? So we talked about how you can't lose it, and you lose it over age, right? People start to have, you know, suffer from things like dementia and what have you, or Alzheimer's, but even just age itself. Things have not been used in our brains for long periods of time. It can be very difficult to recall them. We talked about effort here. Things that require effort have meaning. Things that are automatic are very meaningful for us, which means it requires very little effort. And so here in our brain, we do something called chunking, right? Which is organizing items into familiar, manageable units, which often occurs automatically. What could be an example of that? What are some things that we can organize into something familiar and manageable to help us remember things? What are like some methods that you guys use? Yes?
When it comes to playing music,
Mm-hmm.
take a phrase, develop it into muscle memory, and then move on. And you know, for instance, if that phrase has to repeat, you just run the same program, yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, excellent example. Right, so playing music. Right, we get into muscle memory, which we would call encoding, right? Remember, getting things in is encoding, transferring things from the senses, from the outside world, into your body, to your organs, to your muscles, up to your brain for storage. We'll call that encoding. So there's a recognition of, let's say, a rhythm. And then there's repetition. And after repetition, we can progress to maybe say another chord, another note, something of the sort. Right, so then we're bracketing these things. We're like, okay, I recognize that there's a rhythm here. From there, I can repeat this rhythm and maybe produce something else according to that. Right, so now we begin to chunk and separate things out into manageable units. Yes, somebody hit their hand up.
I was gonna say 1,000 times. And you're not referring specifically to music, right?
No, it could be, no, it could be anything.
Sometimes recommend to like produce like familiar taste or smells when like taking a test and stuff. So like chewing the same piece of gum or like same flavor of gum.
Yeah.
Taste.
Yeah, absolutely. Even food. Think of that. Like you're about to eat something, candy bar, steak, soup, right? Spaghetti. You automatically remember not to eat them all the same way, right? You eat soup differently than you would spaghetti. You take it in and your mouth actually does what it needs to do differently than it would with steak, right? You're not slurping in steak, right? You're consciously thinking of the previous experiences you've had, right? And so if you separate it, you're chunking all the different food groups and things you're gonna eat. You can have a 5-course meal, you're gonna eat things completely different one another, right? You eat salad different, you're gonna chew it different than the soup, than your main course, and the water or a drink. So yeah, absolutely. But we're doing this on the automatic process, right? Because automatic, like food is meaningful, you have a lot of experience of eating it, right? It's automatic. You're not consciously thinking about it. You're talking like you've been talking while you're eating. So your brain has already stored that memory in there, right? Which is, guess, we just have to think of how fascinating the human mind is. Like, you're like, wow, this is automatic. Now, it seems simple because it's automatic. Like, well, that's pointless. Like, why are we even discussing it? We know it's automatic. No, I mean, this is fascinating that we do these things, right? Because the other animals don't do most of what we do. They do a lot, but not most of what we do, right? So there are some mnemonics, memory aids, especially techniques that use vivid imagery. What are some things that use vivid imagery and organizational devices to help us memorize? Colors, right? Yeah, icons, colors, calendars, right? What else? Vivid imagery. Let's say fonts, right?
I was gonna say distinctions.
Yeah, distinctions, okay. But think of this, even fonts. Right, if I ask you to recall like logos of a brand, like, hey, what does Gucci brand look like?
Double G.
Double G, but you may recall the font, right? You're like, it's not in cursive, Professor Ross, it's the big G,
Yeah.
So you can recall all these things just off the font. And then some of you like, oh yeah, that one is written in cursive, right? They use cursive, but they use Old English for that one. I know that one, I recall that. So yeah, colors, fonts, distinctions, as you say, icons, memes and stuff like that. They have all these different things. And then we have hierarchies, which are organization of items into a few broad categories that are subdivided into narrow concepts, which is the same as chunking. It's just a way that you do it, right? You got them very broad, but you have quite a few. Spacing effect. Encoding is more effective when it's spread over time, which we talked about is like studying an hour before a class when you absolutely didn't read anything else, right? You didn't space out your learning. So that short-term memory is going to be useless once you finish the exam. Why? Because you only spent an hour looking at the stuff. You're like, I don't remember the stuff after that. I just need it to be useful to pass the test. I have no real use for it other than that. Or you're like, hey, I read little by little over time. You're like, now it has meaning. Like, I've been reading this the last month. It has real meaning because you've connected dots between different parts of things. You space things out to have better understanding as opposed to just getting it all together and mass practice, right? So yeah, mass practice, right? So we want to take the test. We got an hour, in an hour we're going to take the test. You don't read the information, don't look at anything. You're going to try to cram it all in. Let's call it cramming. Produces speedy, short-term learning and feelings of confidence. You feel confident you're going to pass, but leads to quick forgetting. Right? You finish, all your anxiety is flushed out, and now somebody maybe 2 weeks later like, hey, remember that thing? Like, no, I don't remember it, but I still got an A. Right? It's not meaningful to you. Testing effect. Enhance memory after retrieving rather than simply rereading information. Repeated self-testing using the retrieving and testing effect. Questions in this text, for example, does more than assess learning. It improves it. So yeah, rather than simply rereading information, you're kind of testing yourself out on it, right? Enhance memory after retrieving. Practice may not make perfect, but smart practice, occasional rehearsal and self-testing makes for lasting memories, right? So repeating things over time, but trying to spread out the time. So we have two different processings when it comes to memory. We have shallow and deep, right? So verbal information is processed at different levels, which affects long-term retention. So we have shallow processing, which encodes on a very basic level of words, letters, or on a more intermediate level of words, sounds, right? So we process letters, we process sounds. Deep processing encodes semantically, which we say, what is semantics? Anybody remember what semantics is? There we go, we can't remember, right? Based on the word's meaning, semantics is meaning, right? The meaning of a word in the context, right? So if you really truly understand the meaning of a word is better than you just being able to memorize the word, right? If you understand the meaning, you've made it more personal to you. The deeper, more meaningful the processing, the better our retention. Right? Making things personal. New information is processed easily when it's meaningful related to our experience. What are some of your best memories based on experience? What are some things that stick out in your life? Highlights. I'll recall some of mine too.
You ask that question?
Let's just say, not even highlights, I don't want, it doesn't have to be completely positive. But what are some of your strongest memories of it all? And the most personal, meaningful memories that are kind of always present to some degree. I'll say first time I was able to drive. And first time I left the country. Children. Marriage. Deaths in the family or people close to you. And I'll just put just general some achievements, right? What about you? What are some things that stick out? Yes?
My last high school football game.
How come?
It was, we had a lot of games till the last one.
Last high school football game. And it's meaningful because it's the last, right? It's kind of like the last day of high school, and you kind of realize you probably won't see these people ever again. Or in grammar school, you kind of, oh man, no more playing on the playground with these people. Or we'll always be friends, and like, yeah, right. Everybody moves on and live their life. Who else? Who else? Meaningful memories based on their experiences.
I ride a bike.
Bike?
Yeah.
Riding a bike. Alright. How so? What was such a great experience with that?
For the first time I ride a bike, it's still in my head that I busted my ass going into a bush.
Relative to pain. And pain is sometimes the best teacher of things, right? So these things require no memory. We have experiences in life, and they're very meaningful to us relative to other things. And they actually help us. They help us remember other things associated with these things, right? And even with this, we're able to actually help other people based off experience. Tell me about your experience of your memories. I remember one time, and this is what I learned from it. Maybe this could possibly help you. Ebbinghaus, who's one of the famous German psychologists we talked about last class, estimate that learning meaningful material requires 1/10 of the effort compared with learning nonsense material. Going back to multiple choice versus, hey, write about your personal experience. Multiple choice requires 1/10 of the effort. Writing about your personal experience requires 1/10 of the effort of trying to just memorize definitions and concepts. That takes effort. You gotta read the book. What's the actual definition of that? What's the real one? Hope they don't try to trick me and make it sound all very similar. I can actually remember which one is accurate. But if I tell you to write about your personal experience, you're kind of like, man, this kind of interesting. Okay, all right, I can think about that one time. This kind of relates to that. And then you guys come up with great stuff. In your exams, you come up with really good stuff because it's personal. It has meaning. It's not garbage. We have especially good recall for information we can relate to ourselves, a tendency referred to as self-reference effect. Amount of information remembered depends on both the time spent in learning it and on your making it meaningful for the processing. Which means you want to learn anything, you have to make it meaningful. You can learn anything, right? I think you can make math, if you can make arithmetic or mathematics meaningful to your personal life, you probably will become good at that particular area of mathematics. Like accounting or something like that, right? You want to keep up with your money, or learn how to invest your money. You become really good at finance, or financial mathematics, I would call it, right? Understanding interest upon interest, these sorts of things, credit systems, what have you. Our capacity for storing long-term memories is essentially limitless, meaning that there really is no limit to what we can store in our brains for memory. This is contrary to belief that we can add more items only if we can discard old ones. I guess that was no thought that, we, just like a computer, right, you have a certain limitation of the hard drive, you have a certain limitation even for the size of the memory, that you have to increase your hard drive and buy some new memory in order to get new stuff in there, which is not true for the human brain. Which means that to our understanding, the human brain, when it comes to memories, can store a limitless amount of information, larger than any library system or even the internet itself, if one were to want to achieve that. Despite the brain's vast storage capacity, we do not store information as libraries store their books in single precise locations. Yes, we do not use the actual processes that library systems use, but we can have relative information of the same. Instead, brain networks encode, store, and retrieve the information that forms our complex memories. That is, the brain distributes the components of a memory across a network of locations of the brain. Some of the brain cells that fire when we experience something fire again when we recall it, which means we have particular firing mechanisms for particular memories within our brains. And actually, there's even emotions attached to this, right? Actually, recall something personal to you about a loved one, a death in the family, or anything, or a marriage or a graduation. There's emotions attached to it, different firing mechanisms, and you may feel, endorphins and increase and things of that nature. Now, also, they say that we can recall time. Typically, the average person can recall time, like actual, hey, what time is it? Without looking. Like, you can recall within a 5-minute error, right? You can kind of like, I feel like it's like 1:35, Professor Ross. And then you're like, so 1:33. All right, without looking at your clocks, what time is it?
25.
All right. Yeah, I just said 1:30, so pretty good. But on average, even your body kind of memorizes automatically. So even if you go to sleep, sometimes your body will tell you to wake up because it's time for you to get up to go somewhere, And I'm like, oh man, what time we get to, like, you know. And typically you're within a 5-minute window of what time you actually believe it to be. We have two conscious memory systems, semantic memory, explicit memories of facts and general knowledge, and episodic memory, explicit memory of personally experienced events. Our hippocampus, which is our neural center located in the limbic system, registers and temporarily holds elements of explicit memories before moving them to other brain regions for long-term storage. So we keep a lot of our short-term memory in the hippocampus. Memory consolidation, neural storage of long-term memory. We'll skip a little bit of this. The cerebellum plays an important role in forming and storing implicit memories created by classical conditioning. Remember we talked about classical conditioning before, the dog and the bell, salivating at the sound of the bell. That's typically is stored in cerebellum, because those are implicit memories. The basal ganglia, which is deep brain structures involved in motor movement, which is like walking, talking, automated process of memories that we use for procedural. And we said the procedural to do tasks, walking, reading, talking, moving, running, etc. Then we have infantile amnesia, which is conscious memories of the first 3 years is blank, meaning that we typically start off with a blank here, command of language and well-developed hippocampus needed for such memory. And you have to develop the hippocampus, so in the early stages of life, that part of the brain is not truly developed. As it develops, then it begins to work a little bit better to store certain memories. The hippocampus is one of the last brain structures to mature. Why do we think that is? Anybody just come up with an idea or theory? Why would the hippocampus, one of the last brain structures to mature, if that is used for developing conscious memories? I mean, there's no real answer, so you can come up with your own answer. What's a theoretical idea we could think of? So conscious memory is blank first 3 years. Command of language and a well-developed hippocampus is needed for such memory. Why is it the last part of the brain to mature?
Because it started later?
Hmm?
Because it started later?
It started later? What do you mean?
That didn't have like the same starting line as the other ones, or took longer?
Yeah, I mean, it started later, but why would you think, let's just say, based off nature, why is that kind of the last part of the brain to just like actually mature? Why nature doesn't have it to be programmed in the middle? What do you think that?
Maybe the first part of your life, you don't really need memory.
It's probably not useful, right? The first 3 months, you're completely like coddled, taken care of, you know? So kind of like, it doesn't have use yet, right? It's gonna have use as time progresses and develops. Because literally, someone is watching you probably close to like 24/7, like, you know, eavesdropping to make sure you don't turn over, sudden infant death syndrome. So those earliest stages of life, you are completely monitored. You're not even like a 2-year-old where you're left to run around and play. So yes,
Do you think that can vary situational?
I mean, it can, but, no. I mean, if you don't,
I feel like some people might need it earlier than others.
some people might need that area of the brain earlier than others. It could be true, right? We're just maybe hypothesizing here, but I would think that the first 3 months, you absolutely don't need it, right? Because in any society, it doesn't matter where you are, you're monitored close to 24/7, okay, with 0 to 3 months, right? There's not a time where someone's not even asleep and actively listening for the child. Baby sleeps next to the bed, you know, movements are even monitored. You know, so you guys, nobody has children, right? Nobody has, okay, so yeah, I'll tell you now, literally the first 3 months, you watching the baby 24/7. Like you're not even probably walking out of the room no more than 30 seconds. Because you're afraid the baby may turn over and not breathe, right? Maybe turn over and fall on his face or coughing or strangling or something like that. And it doesn't matter what culture or from, whatever, this is how it goes. Yeah. And it's just hypothesis. There's no real direct, you know, factual knowledge that this is why, but it's just hypothesis. I would think that those early stages of life, which is the baby is completely taken care of. The amygdala, emotions, and memory. Excitement or stress triggers hormone production and provokes the amygdala, two emotion processing clusters in the limbic system, to engage memory. What's an example? Where excitement or stress triggers hormones for you to engage your memory.
If you're in like a car crash,
Yeah, absolutely. Say a car crash. What else? I'll say, let's just say substances. Such as alcohol, right? You ever go out drinking? You ever go out drinking with your buddy or drinking with your friend, and immediately all you do is recall like old time, like, dude, remember we went to that party? Remember that? Remember that 2 years ago? Remember that last week? That excitement, right? That excitement has helped you easily produce all these memories that are personal to you. Sports, right? Sports would be like, hey, I'm playing basketball. I got 4 other people out here on the court with me who are part of my team. I already know by memory how everybody plays, a different style of play, where they normally go position themselves. Therefore, my own memory causes me to make the good decisions on the court while all of this is happening, all this excitement is happening instantaneously. Emotions often persist with or without conscious awareness, right? You ever just get emotional for no reason? Like without even, focusing on things? You'll be like, hey, I got stuff out of class, like, man, I just thought about something, that's crazy. I just remember something. Right, which means there's no effort, you just remember something, like, oh crap. Or it just brings a tear to your eye, right? You might remember something 15 years ago, somebody dying, and you just like, can't control yourself. Emotional arousal causes an outpouring of stress hormones. The hormones lowers activity in the brain's memory forming areas. Which is kind of we talk about with car crash, right? Sometimes you can remember vividly, and sometimes recalling a stressful situation you might not remember, right? You may distort that whole entire memory because it's just too painful to recall, Which is kind of, we talked about before, like hindsight bias. So if things are too painful to recall, too emotional to recall, those memories can be subdued and buried. In fact, I don't want to remember that. Right? Somebody brings something up to you, very negative, like, I don't even think about that. I don't want to remember that. I can't ever remember that. Like, I forgot about that. Right? Let's say like if you bury arguments or disagreements you've had with really close friends or family, and you've never like addressed the situation, right? And now you use those arguments to bury them deep in your brain. At some point, you may actually have a hard time recalling that. I don't even remember why we were upset with each other. That's so long ago. Because there's emotions attached to it, right? Flashbulb memories, clear memories are emotionally significant moments of events occur via emotion, triggered hormone changes, and rehearsals, which is essentially instantaneous memories related to emotions. Key memory structures in the brain for memory are frontal lobe, so here's the front of the brain here. Basal ganglia, we talked about that, talked about the amygdala, we can really get to the cerebellum of the hippocampus. Synaptic changes, remember we talked about synapses are just these highways where you can open up new pathways to learn things. So synapses change over time based off memories to take in. An increase in synapses firing potential after brief rapid stimulation. Long-term potentiation, the brain will not erase memories after long-term potentiation. Believed to be a neural basis for learning and memory. I won't really focus too much on that. That's something that won't be on the exam. All right, we'll try to wrap it up with this, our two memory systems. So here's our memory processing, right? We got the part that's meaningful, no, not meaningful, which is, these are automatic, I would say is more meaningful, right? But we got effort, the ones that require effort, right? So things that be more short-term memories. Short-term memories require a lot of effort. So over on this track, we got effortful memories, explicit memories, declarative with conscious recall. We have to really, really think, be cognitive about them to really recall them. The process in the hippocampus and the frontal lobes. They go to semantic memory, which we say semantic is about meaning, facts and general knowledge, right? Episodic memory, personally experienced events, family holidays, things like that, episodes. And then on the other side, we have automatic memory processing, right? Implicit memories, we don't have to declare it, it's without conscious recall. Processing the cerebellum, basal ganglia, space, time, frequency, where you are, what you ate for dinner yesterday, motor and cognitive skills, riding a bike, and walking and reading, classical conditioning, reaction to going to the doctor and getting certain procedures, which would be frightening. And let's see what's next. Maybe we'll wrap it up there. All right, let's finish up here. Memories are held in storage by a web of associations. All right, retrieval cues serve as anchor points to pathways of memories suspended in this web. When you encode into memory the name of the person sitting next to you in class, you associate it with other bits of information about your surroundings, your mood, your seating position, and so on. The best retrieval cues come from associations formed at the time of the memory's encoding. And priming is the activation, often unconsciously, of particular associations and memory. Okay. But basically, while you're sitting here right now, you're drafting up memories of what's happening right now. Right? Other than just, of course, you're thinking about things you gotta do, things on your laptop, things on your phone, notifications, social media, you know, what you're gonna eat, you know, what you gotta do directly after this class, and also things learned in class as well. So you're producing these all of these memories simultaneously at once, but you're associating so many different things to just even right now as you're recognizing, taking in this information. You're thinking of a whole web of things that are going into your memory to be processed for either long-term or short-term memory. That will be it. Yeah, I'll probably wrap this probably be it for memory, and then next, well, this Wednesday we'll do motivation, right? Which should be pretty